What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we are back into the fantasy football world. I've got my Week 4 NFL recap for the games that happened this past weekend. I missed Week 3 last week, but we are back this week, and I've got all the information you need to know for going forward into Week 5 and to have a successful rest of your fantasy season. So, without further ado, I'm not going to waste any more time, and let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to start out talking about a few running backs. We had some injuries this week. I'm going to go over kind of what you should expect for those running backs going forward. Obviously, Nick Chubb and Austin Ekeler is who I'm talking about here. They both suffered injuries. They left the game. They did not return, and they are both expected to miss some time. So, Austin Ekeler, that's plain and simple. You've been seeing Josh Kelly get a bunch of carries along with Ekeler in that LA backfield. So, you guys need to go pick up Josh Kelly if he's not rostered in your leagues, and Justin Jackson as well. Josh Kelly is going to be the main beneficiary here, but Justin Jackson will receive some touches as well. So if you guys are looking for a replacement option for Austin Ekeler, as am I in 3 leagues, I believe, where I had him as my RB1 or 2, you guys need to get Josh Kelly and Justin Jackson just in case. So make sure those guys are rostered in all of your leagues, and you should be set there. And then for Nick Chubb, this one's plain and simple here. Nick Chubb obviously has Kareem Hunt in his backfield, who was drafted in 100% of leagues this year. So you're not going to get Kareem Hunt off the waiver wire. He's probably turning into that league-winning type caliber of a player. Kareem Hunt is obviously an exceptional talent. He's a superstar player. We remember the days of the Chiefs when he was an electric runner and was making the Patriots look like they couldn't play defense. So Kareem Hunt is definitely going to set into that league-winning status that we talked about all offseason. He's been talked about that way for 2 years now, and it looks like it might come to reality now that Nick Chubb is going to miss some time. We don't know exactly how long Chubb is going to miss, but I think that Kareem Hunt holds a very, very valuable role for the foreseeable future. I'm going to keep going with the running backs here in this first little segment of the video. I'm going to talk about some guys that you should not hit the panic button on yet. Guys that underperformed relatively for a week or two now, but I think are still extremely fine players and are going to be real staple players in your lineup for the entirety of the season, and you should not panic on them yet. And the first one of those players is Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs in standard formats is doing okay. He's not really getting touchdowns, but obviously he's not getting that reception role either, which is kind of hurting his PPR or half PPR value. I own him in a half PPR league and a PPR league, and so obviously he's been underproducing for me there. He hasn't really been getting any catches, but that's not really what you expect to see from Jacobs. You expect to see 20-plus carries out of Josh Jacobs, over 100 yards, and a couple scores, but Josh Jacobs just hasn't been getting that done, and that's no fault of his own. The Raiders have been playing some very good opponents the last 2 weeks. Josh Jacobs was matched up against the Saints, and they have a very stout run defense 2 weeks ago, and he actually performed halfway decent. I believe he had 7 or 8 half PPR points, but for a team that stuffs the run as well as the Saints does, that was a very nice performance from him. And then this week he played the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills, again, have a very solid front. They have a great run stop. They're very well coached defensively, and I have zero concern with Josh Jacobs only putting up 7 or 8 points again this week. Josh Jacobs will get into his more favorable matchups later on this season, and he'll have those boom games that we've all been waiting for. Obviously, he's busted the last 2 weeks, but do not panic on Josh Jacobs. Know his worth. Do not try and sell him. Josh Jacobs will come through for you later this season. Next up, this is a huge one. I think he's going to finish higher than Josh Jacobs despite missing a game this year, and that's Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders had a pretty dang good week last week. It wasn't anything exceptional, but he got the job done against the Cincinnati Bengals. Sanders is a very efficient runner. He can explode as well on any given play. But he had the San Francisco 49ers defensive front last night on Sunday Night Football, and obviously that is a tough task to handle, and I thought Sanders did it pretty dang well for a team that is very injured as the Philadelphia Eagles are. I know that the 49ers are missing some guys too, but the Eagles are missing players all over their offense. And I think that Miles Sanders had some very promising plays. He had a couple of nice electric runs, but other than that, the 49ers run stop is just really good. Where I think Sanders adds another dimension to the game is his pass-catching value. I see him having more of a role in that perspective than I see Josh Jacobs having throughout the season, so that's why I think that he'll score a little bit higher than Jacobs, but I think that Miles Sanders is going to be an RB1 down the stretch for the remainder of the season. He only put up 8 points last night, but I am not concerned about that one bit. Sanders has a bit of a tough stretch coming up here. He's got Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and then the New York Giants. But after that, it's clear coasting for Sanders. And if you can just get into the fantasy playoffs, Sanders is going to be breaking out and having humongous games for your team. Now I'm going to move into some panic players at the running back position, and I'm going to start out with Kenyon Drake of the Arizona Cardinals. I was not high on Drake all offseason. I was not a Kenyon Drake fan. I was saying do not draft Kenyon Drake. I did not like him whatsoever. I thought he was a very inefficient runner, and I did not believe in the Arizona Cardinals run offense. The offensive line is not good, and I was not expecting anything big out of Kenyon Drake, but that's a guy who owns one share of him. He's really crumbled my lineups 2 weeks in a row now. He only had 3 fantasy points this week, and that's just not sustainable. The Cardinals were trailing most of the game, but Kenyon Drake is one of the top players in the NFL in carries per game, and Kenyon Drake is doing nothing with those carries. He's not getting in the end zone. He's not getting big explosive runs. Kenyon Drake is a bad football player. Chase Edmonds is a guy that I loved going into this season, and I was kind of like in that situation where if Kenyon Drake gets hurt, I think that the Cardinals' run game will explode because I think Chase Edmonds is a lot more efficient. He can do a lot more things with the ball in his hand, a lot more elusive, and he can catch the ball as well. Another guy I'm slightly panicking on is Ezekiel Elliott for the Dallas Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott is just not getting carries because Dallas is in these shootouts, and Zeke is putting up touchdowns, which is what is saving his week totals. But when Zeke doesn't score a touchdown, it's bound to happen sooner or later. He's going to post a really ugly game. And the Dallas Cowboys offense is really just playing catch-up all game long. So Ezekiel Elliott is not getting that 15-plus touch workload that we're expecting out of him. I think that for Zeke to return his top-end value, he needs to be getting those 15 to 20 touches per game, whether it's on the ground or through the air. I think that he just needs to have a higher volume. His running game hasn't gotten going because Dallas is in these shootouts and they're playing catch-up, so they can't run the ball. Zeke only had 54 yards rushing against the Cleveland Browns this week. So something has to change in that Dallas offense or with that defense. They have to slow the tempo of the game down, and they have to get the ball to Zeke more. And then my last 2 running backs on the list are 2 players that had breakout games, and I was really impressed with. Of course, Joe Mixon is the first of the 2. Joe Mixon had a slow, sluggish start to the season, but he finally blew up, and Joe Mixon scored 3 touchdowns. He had like 150-something scrimmage yards this week. He was great against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I know is not saying much because that defense isn't great, but it was really promising to see Joe Mixon get all those touches and do so much with them. And then secondly, Antonio Gibson was really good this week. Not too many yards rushing, but he was good through the air. He was explosive. He was efficient, and he got in the end zone. So Antonio Gibson is a guy that I am growing more and more comfortable with putting into the RB2 role in your starting lineups. I'm going to go a bit of a different route here. We're moving into the tight ends. And I'm just going to talk about some of the big-name tight ends that played on Sunday. Zach Ertz, first of all, I am starting to worry. I am very close to hitting the panic button on Zach Ertz. He has no competition in the tight end room right now. Dallas Goedert is on IR, and Zach Ertz is doing next to nothing for the Eagles offense. He's still the go-to guy for Carson Wentz, but that offense is just, passing-wise, is very poor. He had 4 fantasy points in half PPR scoring, but he had 4 catches for 9 yards and was bailed out by a 2-point conversion. Ertz, when I watch him on the field, seems to be lacking that finesse, that route running ability, that savvy that we're used to seeing from him, and I'm not seeing him get as much space on his routes as I'm used to in the past. I'll give Ertz another week or 2, and then after that, he might end up being a trade deadline sell for me. I'm starting to get really worried, and I am very, very close to bailing on Zach Ertz in all leagues. Next up, a guy that you're kind of rejoicing, you're very happy with, is Mark Andrews' performance on Sunday afternoon. He had 2 kind of lull weeks after a big Week 1 performance, and Mark Andrews is right back in that top-tier discussion after he had a great game on Sunday afternoon against the Washington football team. He had down-the-field receptions that were looking really good, so the touchdowns weren't just like goal line, flip it out to Mark Andrews type plays. Like, they were down the field crossing routes and like seams down the middle of the field. So Mark Andrews looked really good, and I was very impressed with this play. And then, holy cow, George Kittle was an absolute machine on Sunday Night Football. 15 catches for 183 yards and a touchdown. George Kittle was an absolute monster. George Kittle proved why he's the best tight end in the league by far right now. He was exceptional all night long. He was dragging Eagles defenders with him left and right, and they could not bring him down to the ground. And obviously he was wide open if he got 15 catches. So George Kittle is an absolute superstar. If you got him on your fantasy lineup, good for you. That's a very useful player for you, and I think that you guys are set if you've got George Kittle going forward, because if he did that with Nick Mullins, imagine what he's going to do when the offense gets back to normal. And by no means is George Kittle going to put up 31.5 fantasy points per game, but I'm just saying that from a consistent fantasy perspective, from the tight end position, George Kittle is going to provide elite numbers for you, and that's where you can really get league-winning value from, is the tight end position when you massively outscore your opponent's tight ends. So George Kittle, absolute stud. Love him in fantasy lineups this year. Over to quarterbacks now. I'm going to talk about a few guys that I think had noteworthy performances and moving forward are key players that have fantasy value. So Justin Herbert proved against a very good Tampa Bay defense that he is startable in fantasy lineups. Justin Herbert was throwing passes down the field. He was very accurate. He threw a pick, but he had some really nice touchdowns to not really big name guys. So obviously Herbert had a big part to do with that. They were accurate passes, and Justin Herbert, if you're in need of a quarterback to start, a stream quarterback even, or a second quarterback on your roster, Justin Herbert is a guy to pick up on the waivers this week. He is a green light for me. Go get Justin Herbert for your team. I'll talk about Deshaun Watson here. I'm a little bit nervous about him, and it has nothing to do with Deshaun Watson. His team is just awful. That offense struggled. The Vikings defense is terrible, and they struggled to put up points against them. Deshaun Watson got all of his fantasy points in the fourth quarter of that game. It was really scary to watch. I would have had Deshaun Watson as my quarterback in the league, and I watched him have virtually nothing through the first half. It's really hard to watch, honestly. I really wish DeAndre Hopkins was still there and Bill O'Brien was a complete tool and trade him for David Johnson, because I think that Duke Johnson, who's the second running back, is better than David Johnson at this point. But Deshaun Watson, love the talent. He's a great player. He's making these ridiculous plays happen where he gets like 3 scrimmage yards rushing from these plays, whereas before he could bomb it downfield to an open receiver. But he also got robbed by a touchdown. His Will Fuller went up and made a great catch. The ball hit the ground, though. He hauled it in, but then when he went to the turf, the ball moved, so they called it no touchdown. It was 4th and goal, and the Vikings took that one. But Deshaun Watson, I'm starting to get nervous because of that team, and that offensive scheme is just not great. And then my last guy to talk about is Dak Prescott. This guy, if the Cowboys keep playing the way they're going to play, is an absolute stud. He should be QB1 without question this year. The guy's thrown for over 400 yards in every single game. He's got multiple touchdowns, too. He throws about a pick a game, but when he's putting up that many yards, when he's rushing as well, when he's throwing all these touchdowns, Dak Prescott is an absolute must-start, and he is a beast in fantasy this year. And then before we get out of here today, we'll talk about the receivers quick. Breakout performances from Odell Beckham Jr., absolute cowboy killer. Odell Beckham is a freak of nature. He is still clearly a very good player. The Browns' offense finally has a direction. The talent has been there for years, but Kevin Stefanski, run the football, play action pass, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, they finally figured out the formula. They put 49 points on the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense is obviously struggling right now. They're in a rut, but holy cow. They've got talent. Aldon Smith is a beast. DeMarcus Lawrence should be a beast. They've got some guys in that secondary. I think Trevon Diggs is probably going to be a star one day. He's not necessarily the greatest cover guy, but he goes up and makes tackles in the flat. He makes plays down the field. So I think Dallas has stars, but obviously Cleveland was just driven. They ran the football down Dallas's throat. Dallas could not get off the field defensively or stop the pass, and Odell Beckham was the exceptional wide receiver in this game. Breakout performance from him. And I think that moving forward, the Browns might have a shot to make the playoffs as a wild card team this year. The Ravens don't look quite as dominant as I expected them to, so I think that obviously Cleveland got demolished by them week 1, but they might give them in Pittsburgh a run for their money. And then DJ Chark, I loved the game from DJ Chark this week. DJ Chark was a guy that I was picking in a lot of leagues as a guy who I thought could put up wide receiver 1 numbers, and a guy that was not going in that range in drafts. So DJ Chark had 2 touchdowns on the day. He had about 90-something receiving yards, and he had 8 catches. So DJ Chark had a great performance. I was really impressed with him, and I was extremely happy to see the production from him on the field this week. And going forward, I'm starting DJ Chark every single week, unless he has a terrible matchup. So Chark is a go for me. I love Chark in all league formats, standard, PPR, half PPR, whatever it is. Go start DJ Chark. trade for him if you can get a cheap offer off of him, but I think that Chark is a monster and a guy you want on your team this year. Then over to Mike Evans. Mike Evans was a guy that I was not really high on in drafts this year. I didn't think that Tom Brady would be throwing the football down the field. I didn't think that Mike Evans would be the best receiver on the team this year. But due to Chris Godwin's injury, Tom Brady and Mike Evans have developed a chemistry. Mike Evans has scored touchdowns on 1 yard, 2 yards, another 1-yarder, and a 23-yard score. So Mike Evans is a beast. He doesn't need anything exceptional out of Tom Brady to be a great talent. Obviously, he got done with Jameis Winston, and I was seeing a regression from him because of the lack of downfield throws. But clearly, Mike Evans is going to get it done this year. I'm very surprised at the level of production I'm seeing from him, but Mike Evans is another player in fantasy this year that is going to be very productive this season. Another breakout player who I think is turning into a must-starter, and that is CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. 2 touchdowns this week. He's been great the last 3 weeks. As a rookie, it's surprising to see a player this productive so early on, but CeeDee Lamb has been exceptional. I think he might honestly be the best wide receiver on that team. Michael Gallup, very good. Amari Cooper, very good. No knocks on those guys. Those guys are both very good talents, but CeeDee Lamb is a heck of a player himself. And due to the Cowboys' shootout nature, CeeDee Lamb is a must-flex player at the very least. You could even pencil him into wide receiver 2 positions. So CeeDee Lamb, go get him. He's a great player, and put him in your lineups going forward. And then a guy who I'm very happy to see return to the field, my last player on my recap list this week is Deebo Samuel. I was really glad to see him get back into action. Very limited on Sunday Night Football this week, but I thought that with what he had to work with, the touches that he received, Deebo Samuel was very good. He looked like himself. He got an end around and moved for 10 yards. He was breaking tackles. He just looked like his old self. Very limited snap count, though, like I mentioned, and I think that moving forward, Deebo Samuel will take back his starting position, and he will be a very productive fantasy player this season. So, without further ado, guys, if you enjoyed the video, if you found it informational, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn that bell on so you never miss an episode. And without further ado, I will see you guys next time. Peace out.